Is this the pre-pod?
Yeah, this is the pre-pod.
Are we doing
This is it.
We're pre-podding. We're pre-podding.
Right. What's your joke, Chris?
So, do you know how I like to have a wee joke at the beginning of the pod?
We do.
And of late, they've been themed. Oh, I don't know if there's a theme.
There's only been like 3 jokes.
Got another COVID joke, right?
Right.
So, in Germany, they've been dealing and preparing with the crisis by stocking up with a lot of sausages and cheese. I believe I believe they're preparing for the worst case scenario.
Oh, God. Did you make that up?
No, I saw it the other day. I thought that's for the pod. That's good.
I think it's time for the theme tune, Stuart.
Oh, welcome to the Good Roundup. This roundup is from Good. You're a brand consultant based in the UK, and Chris, Julie and I come on, and Chris has told me that I've got to say that we talk about brand. So, I'm just going to check it out. How are Julie and Chris? Are we all well today? We all good?
We're doing very well.
That's good.
It's end of lockdown, week 6.
Chris?
It's not end of lockdown, just for the avoidance of doubt. We're still in lockdown.
Oh, well, it's end of week 6 lockdown then.
This is a very special episode of the Good Roundup. We have a very special guest. A guest I can't tell you I'm very excited about.
We're all very excited.
One of my favourite people.
Oh, Chris. That's a contentious statement considering you have Julie and me on this podcast. So today I am delighted and honoured to have Nat Mayer with us. Hi, Nat.
Hi, Stuart. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Nat.
Hey, Nat.
Well, wait, before we get into the chat, which is good, a little bit of background on Nat. Can you just tell us a wee bit more about you?
Well, I've worked in the design industry for the last nearly 15 years. And as part of that career, I had 3 wonderful years as the MD of the London studio at Good, but had worked with Chris and Stuart, actually, my previous role at the Design Business Association. So I am very passionate about all things design and the industry that sits around it. And that interest led me to create a network called Kerning the Gap to get more women into leadership positions in the design industry. And though I left Good and went to another agency and am now consultant freelancing, I've kept up Kerning the Gap, and that's become almost my full-time baby.
And I think Kerning the Gap is the thing that we want to talk about today. And I think we've had an association with it since its inception. I was there, lucky enough to be there at the very first Kerning the Gap meeting on the banks of the Thames many years ago. And we were all at, what would you call it? It was a seminar, a kick-off?
It was the Scotland launch.
A Scotland launch. Thank you, Julie.
Scotland launch back in, when was that? Was it January? February, yeah.
That was BC.
Yeah, before Corona. And it was the biggest chapter launch, you said, Nat, wasn't it?
It was, hands down.
Numbers.
Glasgow really bought it. Actually, the whole of Scotland, because we had people travel from Inverness and Aberdeen. They came far and wide.
So let's just go back to the beginning. So why did you decide, because it's a nice encompassing line about starting Kerning the Gap for design, getting women in design leadership positions, but why did you spot that and go, hold on, there's a thing here? What was the genesis of that?
Yeah, I had my first directorship at the DBA. And of course, the DBA is incredibly well networked into the broader landscape of the design industry in the UK. And the further I got up in my career, the more I was sitting at tables and thinking, hang on a minute, where have all the women gone? There were less and less and less of them. And I started to reach out to a few of the ones that I was quite well connected with and said, look, there don't seem to be that very many of us. Maybe we should have a thing. And it was, the original concept was we should have like some kind of breakfast group to bring together those that are quite isolated in their businesses. That was while I was at the DBA. And then I went to Elmwood, and I had this crazy global role where I was looking after 5 studios around the world, and there was just no time in the day where a studio wasn't open, and I never really got to put it together. And by the time I came to Good, my own kind of feminist education had matured over that period, and I started to dig deeper into the real lack of gender diversity in leadership roles in the design industry, and found the stats not just kind of frightening, but horrifying. And I thought, someone's got to do something about this. And I had the normal healthy amount of imposter syndrome that any person in leadership has, men or women. And it was only when I had my first managing directorship, which is the position I was offered at Good, and the one that I joined to take, that I finally bona fide thought, I am a woman in leadership who can speak from this platform. And because I had the network courtesy of the Design Business Association, I then had the platform, and I thought, it's going to need to be me. I need to do something about this. And that's where the original concept was born from.
So it kind of started off but as you kind of left the agency after that, it's kind of got chapters all over the UK now. How many chapters have you opened?
So we have 5 chapters now running around the UK. So as you just remarked, also, it started out as a breakfast meeting, and I just sent an invitation to everybody that I knew and said, there's a problem in our industry. 67% of design grads are women, and at that time, only 11% declared were creative directors. We've managed to get that up to 17%, but it's still miles away from where it needs to be. This is an issue. If you're worried about that, come and let's have a conversation and work out what we need to do. And it started as a breakfast event and then became kind of a movement. And it was very London-centric. So we started with events there, and then we launched a mentoring program, and it just really took off. And I was very conscious that it had a massive skew towards London. And even though I had then left Good, of course, you've got studios in Glasgow and London. So I had a much more national view of the landscape of design and thought, this isn't right. We need to do more. And I worked with Merle Hall at Kinnear Dufour on the first pilot for the Southwest. And we said, let's try it. Let's pilot it as a chapter. And that was a really good success. And we ran that for a year. And then we rolled out to Northwest. So we have Manchester and Liverpool within that. And then we have Yorkshire. And within that, we have Leeds and Sheffield. And then we open Glasgow. And in the list for the rest of this year would have been Birmingham, would have been added. But we are currently unable to do physical events, but it doesn't mean that we won't do that and keep rolling those chapters out across the UK, which has been brilliant.
See, you mentioned the mentorship programme, Nat, and I think that's one part of it that I find really interesting. And is that something that came out of what was essentially, I guess, a forum for discussion, if you think about it in the context of what was, like you say, initially a sort of breakfast meeting or gathering? Was that something that was kind of driven by that discussion in terms of this is something, in terms of what do we need to do, what actions can we take, how can we help move things forward? Was that something that was identified in those early discussions as lacking in this space, specifically for women or for just people at a certain stage of their career?
I think it's all those things, actually, Jules. I think every senior woman I had spoke about the value of the mentors that they had, including me. And I had been part of the mentoring program when it was set up at the DBA. They have a program called 2020, and I had been one of the mentors on it. And I'd had this feeling like the mentoring was going to be a big part of how we could create real and practical change, because I have sat in room after room of women, senior women, talking to other senior women about how they've already made it, and essentially not really doing anything practical to translate that into change. And the mentoring program was a really one-to-one, high impact way of being able to do that. And I think there are a lot of senior exec coaching programs, but there are not a lot of mentoring programs for younger women who are in the first stages of their career. I also think there's quite a lot of the old boys network that can work quite nepotistically, so that younger men do go out and seek mentors or have sponsors more naturally. And I don't think it's something that women have often been invited to seek for themselves.
And I think, and one of that's just kind of an extension, maybe this is something we'll get onto later, but I think one of the things that I was I'd taken aback is probably too strong a word, but specifically with the Scotland launch, was that actually the kind of balance between barriers that women were discussing versus actually, a lot of it seemed more about confidence. It wasn't necessarily active barriers that were in place as to why you weren't progressing in your career. It was more about whether it's your confidence to go after a role. And we talked a lot about some of the practicalities around even the wording around recruitment ads and stuff like that. But I think it's quite interesting when you get into those kind of specifics. It's actually, you can see, I could see quite clearly where the value of that mentoring program would be, because just from a confidence and development point of view for individuals, because it's not necessarily always about there's a physical or not physical, there's a metaphorical barrier as to why I'm not, you're not kind of progressing or whatever it may be, but it's more about an individual, confidence.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's not a single event I've done or conversation I've been in where the question of women's confidence doesn't come up, and it's a unifying issue at the individual level.
Where do you think that comes from? Have you got any insight into any of that?
Ton. It's, I suppose, winding back a little bit. Part of the element of Turning the Gap, there were 3 principles that I started it on. One was that it needed to be role agnostic. There's loads of brilliant little creative networks for women, but where do our planners go? Where do our account handlers go? So it needed to have open access to every role within the design agency landscape. Second one was that it needed to be junior and senior women, so it had to be accessible to invite juniors into with senior women. And the third one is that men have to be part of the conversation. So that's why it's called Turning the Gap and not Women in Design, because it's this absolute permission to be allied to the conversation. We all need to be part of the solution.
And I think that's one of its major strengths, I have to say, because it's not just about women learning from women. It's about women advancing in this space. And I think, like you say, you can't exclude men from that conversation. The whole thing becomes pointless then.
No, and men are not the enemy. They're not the ones that are fostering the situation. I mean, it depends on everything, honestly, but
they are. They are not these two gems anyway.
Well, definitely not. As the original sponsor of Turning the Gap is in my bottom left hand corner of the screen. They're absolutely not. They're a fundamental and critical part of the solution, particularly as they run over 90% of our design businesses. So how the hell are we going to change it if we don't engage the entire audience into it? And there have been a lot of focus around the kind of the lean-in phenomena about what the individual needs to do to move themselves forward and start challenging that confidence gap. I think some of that's quite problematic, and where that doesn't go far enough for me is that there isn't the pressure of businesses to create environments where women can thrive. And that's why Turning the Gap is really a rally cry to industry to say, this is our problem, this is industry's problem, and we have to be pioneers in how we create better environments and support the women in our businesses. But it also offers practical tools and support like mentoring to women so that they can build and work through on their confidence. Where does that confidence issue come from? There are plenty of studies that say it goes all the way back to childhood, ingrained stereotypes around how women should behave, the role models that they've had in their lives growing up, and it can be really challenging. I mean, the earliest a young woman will come to the business is age 21, and a lot of those held beliefs are already ingrained by them.
Deep rooted.
So you're unpicking a lot of stuff.
I think that's an interesting, because we've talked about this, and it's always quite, and as a man,
speaking as a man,
as a big hairy man,
as a big hairy man,
white privileged middle class man.
Tick, 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 tick. So as all that, the interesting thing for me is, and it's difficult to kind of articulate without sounding offensive, and I'm not trying to be offensive when I'm saying this to friends, is that...
Oh, I'm going to like this. I'm liking this.
No, but I have never seen it as a problem because of my upbringing. So I was brought up with strong people in my life, the majority of them of which were women. And then when I got into my career, I was surrounded by strong people, the majority of which were women. So when I kind of hear these stories, it's kind of alien to me, because, and I'm not denying that they're happening, of course not, and it's my privileged position that I've not been in that position, and I am not saying for a second it doesn't happen, that this is nonsense.
And I think just to jump into that, Stuart and I talked about this after the event, and I think I agree with Stuart, and we see it obviously from our gender's perspective, which I know that everyone's had enough of hearing about. But the confidence thing's interesting, because Stuart, you and I talked about that confidence. There's a danger that the confidence thing becomes the exclusive preserve of the women, and it's not. There are confidence issues with men as well. That's not necessarily a gender issue, but and I felt at the event there was quite a lot of that. But I think it's important to separate the two. But yeah, separate the two.
But I think it's just, the point is that it's more it is, but I think it's more commonly, it's more I guess my question is it something you see more commonly in women than in men who are in a similar position, as opposed, it's certainly not an exclusive female trait, definitely not. I mean, we've seen that in some of the junior guys within the team as well, absolutely.
The interesting thing is, if we talk about societal norms, it's women who have the permission to talk about not having the confidence. So those gender norms and the experiences and the role models and the lack of visibility of any women in leadership that help encourage women to have the confidence that they could move into that position is one of the endemic issues. But they are encouraged to talk about it, whether that be in peer groups or whether it be in any of those forums, which is something that men don't necessarily feel they have the permission to do, or haven't felt they've had the permission to. We've got wild gender inequality issues in our leadership function of a very privileged middle class industry that we work in. But then we've also got, crippling mental health issues for young men aged 18 to 25. So neither one problem wins over the other one. Actually, this is a whole blend of being able to come together and have the permission of creating a safe space where everyone can share the truth of their experiences. And the point being, Stuart, you are surrounded by loads of women who seem confident. I would hope you would include the women in this room.
Oh, aye, yeah.
But I have crippling moments of lack of confidence. It is still a muscle I work on a daily basis. But what I show you versus what I'm feeling can be very different. And that's...
and I think we're all in the same, we all have our peaks and we all have our troughs. But in February, we had the launch of the Kerning the Gap chapter in Scotland, and Good sponsored that. Was that the official term? Or were you...
Good is the agency partner.
So we're the agency partner in Scotland, which we're very proud of. And there was a panel discussion. There was a bit of an introduction from yourself, Nat, on the aims of Kerning the Gap, which you covered. And then there was a panel discussion. And on that panel were a couple of design teams, I can't quite remember, but the one person I can remember, obviously, was Chris was on the panel. And I thought the panel discussion was great. Chris, how did you find that process? Because you were quite nervous.
Well, I was
conscious of being the privileged white guy in the room.
Yeah, I was the straw man or whatever it is, representing the norm, I suppose. And yeah, I got a couple of comments that way, but it was good. I mean, I thought it was, well, I think it was good. And I think that you probably have to do this every time you have one of these sessions, which is be quite conscious about how the conversation is guided and is grounded in a pragmatic reality, because I think that there is no shortage, and particularly in our panel, I think there was maybe not an awful lot of experience in terms of business, but there was a lot of, everyone's got an opinion on how the world should be, and I think you did a good job of helping to remind them that it's, that once you've got some experience, it's how you're bound by how the world kind of can be, in a business scenario, and that's the tension for me that's always there.
Yeah, I think it's one of the things that has enabled me to have more meaningful conversations with those who are in positions of authority to help change this landscape, is that I've done the job.
Yeah.
I've had somebody tell me they're going on maternity leave 2 weeks after we've given them full-time employment.
And you understand that a client, you need to bring the money in.
Yeah. Massively so.
Reality.
I really remember that actually on the very first event, somebody put their hand up and saying, it was a woman, small agency owner, and she said, 3 of my team, and I've only got 7 people, 3 have gone on maternity leave last year, and I'm not going to make any money for 2 years. Now, I support it, I'm with it, I'm here for that, but tell me, how does my business continue to operate, and how do I not carry the scars of that when I think about my next recruitment move? And I was really struck by it, and I was struck by the honesty, and it's so important that honesty exists, because these are the decisions that are being made behind the scenes. These are the beliefs, these are the experiences that are shaping the decisions that really well-meant business owners are making.
Because, and they're not just decisions that are being made by men. Those business realities, that business reality is the same for whoever's in that leadership position, like you say. And particularly in this space, you run a pretty lean ship. So when you're talking about taking fundamental people out of your business and still trying to deliver projects and turn a profit, and you retain your margins, it's a real challenge. And I think that kind of, and understandably, because I think a lot of the junior people or not junior, but younger people that were within the audience and asking questions were coming at it from are in a very different position, and they've not dealt with that reality yet, and they will get there. But I think even being exposed to some of those discussions and exposed to some of that reality in those conversations has got to be a positive thing.
Because at the event, when the conversation starts going to, recommendations about visiting Glasgow's finest feminist library, I'm lost. I've got nothing to add, and I'm not sure that's the topic and subject area and discussion area that you want, Nat. But it goes there quite quickly unless you're able to moderate it.
Well, I mean, the fascinating thing is, and this harks back to part of our conversation yesterday, Stuart, when we were talking about creating a safe space, and I'll let Stuart round out what he was sharing in terms of his reflections about what the need of more junior members of the industry are. They'll talk about the conversation will go into the territory of feminism and the plight of the marginalised groups very quickly. But when they queue up at the end, the only questions they want to ask me are, how do I speak to my boss about this? How do I negotiate a pay rise? Like the actual nitty gritty of how do I move my career forward. So I think there is a place for that enthusiasm around making change. That's what I tend to steer it back to and try and harness and galvanize that feeling of it should be different. And that's the reality of it, is that woman struggling to work out how she was going to make money in her business over the next 2 years, and she was thinking about it in an atypical traditional model, which is what's kind of hampering the ability to change. Because the reality is it's going to cost your money business to have more women in it. That's why there haven't been more, because there are the associated costs. That's if saying everybody wants to start a family, but you'll need to think more laterally about how you staff up. Job shares, flexible working. There are solutions, but they're not cheap and they're not quick, and they involve commitment from the business. But the younger generation, where they're powerful, is that they're not going to come and work for businesses who don't offer these assets. They won't. We won't get the talent. This is a rally cry and a warning to industry to say we've got about 5 to 7 years to change this, or we just will not. We'll become obsolete in terms of talent. So the status quo cannot survive. We've got to adapt and change, but it will be a journey. And that's the point, Chris, is that the reality of what that journey looks like is going to be slow, man.
It's going to be slow. It's going to be incremental.
100%. It's going to take them 10 years of committing to every single word that comes out of their mouth.
And that's what's so important about you playing that role, because that's the reality. And I think the other thing, to last comment from me on Stuart's question about how I find it, I was quite surprised at how quickly there's a kind of a cloak of suspicion kind of descends on the conversation around business, that it's there to exploit and, give them an inch and they'll take a mile. And I think it's important that you're able to pull that back and say, look, that may be the case in some organizations, but it's not the norm, And you're right, it will be slow, and this is what was discussed on the night. It will be slow. And I think that generally our sector and our industry is more welcoming, and we tend to embrace those ideas about new ways of working quicker than our clients' established businesses and our more, traditional sectors. And so we're ahead of the curve. We're at the top end. We're at the bleeding hitch. It's everyone else we need to worry about,
Well, I mean, that's why it's so depressing, because if we're the best, that we're getting it the best, and if we can't come up with the solution, then accountancy, law, they're fucked. So we have to be the pioneers of how to change this. We have small, agile businesses. 98% of our businesses have less than 50 people in them. We can make change tomorrow if we want to. It costs us money, and that is a bit of a bottom line element of it, and it's going to be slow. So it's a completely different level of commitment. But anybody else is, the amount of gender wash that's happening with people publishing their diversity statements is bullshit. That stuff doesn't change overnight. You're just conveniently recutting the data. It's a painful.
It's the same. That's this. Whatever these businesses are talking about, though, isn't it? Whether it's sustainability or whether it's diversity or whatever it is, you reframe what you're doing to suit the narrative that you want to create. But the reality in terms of how businesses or how decisions are made is probably somewhat different to that.
And that's exactly that point, Jules, is that what we're now doing in Coning the Gap is creating a safe space for businesses to speak openly about their progress, no matter how slow, no matter how small. To encourage that and share that learning and say this is a long journey. So we don't have, all you have to do is kind of be engaged in the conversation to be a member of Coning the Gap. There's no benchmark or audit that takes place, because then people won't engage.
It's just encouraging the conversation, isn't it?
Exactly. It's encouraging the conversation. If everybody in that room takes something away that they can act on, and
do
then
you think
a practical tool in order to help them, then we'll make a difference.
And not to, because it's, the conversation is rightly broader than just, women at what point, if and when they choose to have a family and how that impacts. But do you think, not to talk about the COVIDs, because I know we were going away from the corona, but do you think there would be any positives coming out of this in terms of how flexible work or the adoption of flexible working and the kind of potential impact on how people work and specifically women manage childcare with the challenges that people are facing just now? Do you think there will be a potential knock-on impact in a positive way?
I think there'll be positives and I think there'll be negatives, as there are in all situations, but the positives could be quite landscape changing, actually, because the flexible working thing will be a game changer. I am really struck by how many stories I have of men telling their comedy story of how their child interrupted them on a Zoom call. And I feel like there are women up and down the country going, yeah, it's not doable, is it, to just jump on a call for 5 minutes when you're supposed to be at home and you're trying to balance all those things. Now, I'm not saying all men, because I know that the men in this room definitely have co-parented with their children and they understand and have been supportive of.
I'm saying nothing. No, I do my best. Every day's a journey. Every day's a journey.
I mean, there's a reason why I joined Good, and there's a reason why Coning the Gap was born out of it. So we have to think broader than our day-to-day experience. I think we've been very fortunate to keep the company that we have. But for the majority of women who are working 3 to 4 days a week, and they're doing 5 days in 3, and they are working from home and they are trying to keep that blend, I think everyone experiencing what that really looks like is going to change a lot of top-down C-suite attitudes around flexible working.
And was it David Baker that said, it ultimately comes down to trust, because people can be lazy anywhere. You don't have to be working from home to be unproductive. And I clearly demonstrate that on several occasions. You don't need to be unproductive at home. I can be unproductive in the office any day of the week if I choose to.
Those Ed Sheeran videos don't watch themselves, kid.
It's all about the TikToks now, Stuart. It's all about the TikToks.
Yeah, you speak to women who are managing those levels of commitments. They invariably feel like they're half-assing it at work and half-assing it at home, and feel crippling guilt on both sides, which is a horrible place to exist. So I do think that's going to have been a bit of an eye-opener. I do think there are also women who are clamouring to get back into the office. And I think that's no bad thing for those stories to be told, because there's lots of women who want to be at work. There's lots of women who don't have families. There's a lot of different dynamics that are existing. I think one of the challenges with more remote working is that I'm having conversations at a more junior end, certainly, but how do I get my voice heard in a meeting or with a client? And if that's hard enough to do in person, then when you're in this forum and all you've got is your little box on that screen, it's incredibly difficult. So I think it will present new practical challenges of how women demonstrate their confidence or assert themselves or lead in the conversation. But I think the shape of the world of work will change immeasurably. Or we'll forget it all in 2 weeks and go
probably
back.
We'll forget most of it, let's be honest.
We'll just try and forget.
Just to go back to the launch, because I think one of the criticisms that you could put on any organisation like Coning the Gap is that you do these little soirees of an evening and everybody's there and claps their hands and everybody goes, yep, and feels very, worthy and everything else. But the interesting was the effect that it had in the office, because a lot of our team came up to it. And, the the messages were carried through. And I think that was actually the power of it. It's easy to dismiss as another talking shop, but all you're doing, not all you're doing, but what you are doing when you're talking about it is elevating the consciousness of the scenario. And
that's right. We came back and changed 2 job adverts online after.
That's amazing.
And the kind of horror behind when you looked at how those job adverts were created is that and again, it's this unconscious bias, and it's why you just need it pulled up and just a wee bit of a slap across the face with a fish going, look at this a little bit closer, because supposedly the bias in job adverts are that it has everything in it, that you've got to do this, 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 and this, and the principle being, if you're a guy, you're looking at that going, well, I can do that, I can't do that, but I'll just say I can do that, and then I can do that and I can do that. Whereas supposedly from a women's point of view, in theory, that actually if you can't tick all those boxes off, you're not going to go for the job. Is that correct? Is that the premise?
That's correct. Yeah. Right. Yeah. It's about men will apply if they have 17% of the competency or more, and women won't apply unless they have 90.
That actually is the total fucking story of my life.
There was a classic, as an aside, we were talking with Steph, weren't we, Jules, the other day? We were talking about the shareholder agreements that we've got in the MBO and the classic piece of unconscious bias. And I was saying, I made a joke about if you leave, you're a bad leaver. And Steph said that when she reviewed the documentation, and it's quite a long document, the only time that the female gender is used is in a scenario if they're a bad leaver.
I didn't notice that either, I have to admit. I didn't notice.
So that, I didn't know. So that's come from the legal, that's come from the lawyers. So you can, can't validate whether that's true or not. I've not looked it up. If Steph says it is, then I've got no reason to disbelieve it.
Yeah,
so
but this again is the safe space of sharing those things, like calling yourself out on it or calling each other out on it, and doing that in a way that assumes that people are well-meaning and have not realised, because that's the fucking point of unconscious bias. We don't know we've got it. Yeah. So we have to become conscious and think about every bit of language that we use, or second guess ourselves if we've made a decision, and really check in with it and go, is there anything at play there? Have I really been, and get someone to come in towards it with you and kind of be that support.
One of the other things, and not just to talk about good motivation, but I think we've touched on it before, the coaching, everyday coaching, and having a bit of a kind of development plan and focus for the team in terms of understanding how their individual performance contributes to the broader business goals and all that kind of stuff. And so there's been a kind of moving away from these annual review processes into much more sort of everyday and then monthly sort of coaching sessions, etc. Anyway, long story short, tying it back to that kind of confidence thing, there's a few conversations that we've had with a few of the team members internally that have kind of built on some of those themes that are identified, that we talked about in Kerning the Gap, around confidence and how to make sure that your voice is heard in meetings, or how to tackle some of those situations where you've got maybe more senior people or more confident people, and this was back in the day when we were sitting in an office together, so you didn't have the challenge of everything being on conference call or video conference. And it's I think having those development plans, for want of a better word, in place with all of the team, in those regular weekly sessions with their line managers, that you can feed some of those conversations, you tie some of those conversations together. Do you know what I mean? So when you're talking about, and it doesn't just, in that, in a couple of these cases, it was about the female members of the team, but the same principle would apply whether it was one of the junior guys. It's creating the space to kind of bring some of these conversations and issues to the fore, and then managing it within the business so that it doesn't become something that's mentioned once and forgotten about. It actually becomes a point that you can focus on and develop with that specific member of the team to make sure that they feel they can have a voice, etc. And some becomes quite practical help, as opposed to just a kind of wide-ranging conversation that you have.
Yeah, and I think so. There's a couple of things in there for me, Jules. One is that mentors are amazing, but sponsors are invaluable. Having people in the business who are championing you when you are in a meeting and you've noticed that there's a woman at the table and she hasn't spoken, you throw the conversation to her, you make that happen, like helping overcome those first barriers of confidence, and actually being there to see where every opportunity is to help and reinforce that. But actually, just coming back to the confidence question, confidence is pointless without competence. I have plenty of confident people, and I've hired them for 10 minutes, and that's that, because if you haven't got the delivery to back it up.
Yeah, big time.
So that's another get real element of this conversation, which is I'm lacking confidence. I'm like, do you actually have the competence to be hired for one of these roles as well? Like, are we sure it's just a confidence issue? Let's work on those. And the majority of the time it is. They've demonstrated. This is one of the really frustrating elements, is that one of the places that gender bias plays out most is in male leaders with female staff moving the goalposts. They have to prove it and prove it again. It's called the double bind. So evidencing that you can do something. So coming to your next appraisal and showing that you've achieved the task that they've set for them, they'll make you do it again and again. It's something about the confidence and competence of women that we unconsciously carry. So we are incumbent on doing that. But yes, you've got to have the practical skills. And, negotiation is a skill. Presentations are a skill. Asking for a pay rise, that's a skill. These are things you can learn for sure, and you should.
And this is the thing, is that you know that you've come a long way with being able to have a constructive conversation about the competence of females in leaders. Then you're not just being attacked for talking about them because they're female. Well, what do you think now? There's been a lot of chat about the on the global stage about the countries with female leaders working really well through the COVID crisis, and from New Zealand to the Scandinavian countries. Is it Jacinda Ardern? She's an amazing.
She's been woman. Heralded as
and she's got this kind of.
She's our poster woman at the moment.
Kind of relatability and empathy and trust, and our own Nicola Sturgeon as well. Let's not forget. And they do seem to have some qualities that really help them stand out against, Eton educated white male privileged men who, drive between their mansions, and
there's a sincerity in what they say. I think that's really, it does, and it's not when you think, and I'll leave the expert Nat to talk about this, but I do think if you just from a layman's point of view, you kind of, particularly in the midst of this, when everything is kind of turned upside down, people want to trust what they're hearing, and it's that open, honest, transparent communication, all the stuff we talk about in the business. And that's, like you say, that's what, whether you're the British public or the New Zealand public, whatever, that's what you are looking for. And there's a sincerity, I think, in particularly, I've watched Jacinda quite, not a lot, but you're talking, there is that, even if you didn't, and from a political point of view, even if you don't agree with her views or her position on things, she has an integrity about her when she speaks that I think a lot of probably male white politicians don't have.
Yeah.
Well, it's leadership. It's leadership at the end of the day.
Leadership at its best, for sure. But it tends to be, we all have an ego, of course, but it tends to be egos more in check with leaders like Jacinda Ardern. And there are male leaders who can ape that, but at the moment, in times of crisis, we're seeing some male leaders seek to be the hero of the piece, and it's either the Churchillian war metaphors or it's them trying to come up with medical solutions themselves. The humility to say, I don't know, we don't know, is not something that has been rewarded in men as much as it has been rewarded in more female communication. So I think that's probably one of the key differentiators at the moment. And Angela Merkel is a scientist, so she's actually got the competence to hold her position in a scenario like this. So suddenly those skills and that expertise becomes more important than being a good politician. And I think it's doing a huge amount for women in leadership on the world stage. It is, you said that's leadership. That's what good leadership looks like, Chris. And this is one of the conversations that the future of business is more female, because it's more empathic, more communicative, more collaborative. And that Gen Z, as they come through, that's the kind of style of leadership they're demanding. And women are in an incredibly powerful position, because if they're holding those skills innately, I'd much rather upskill the competence, teach an naturally empathic person how to do negotiation skills, than take somebody with zero empathy that was a brilliant negotiator and teach them how to be empathic.
I think you're absolutely right.
So this is such a hopeful and encouraging time that women should value those qualities that they have innately that sometimes they feel are holding them back. And to your point, Jules, seeing that on the world stage at the worst of times, the skills that we are valuing are those honesty, humility, compassion. and integrity. And that's really the shape of leadership, and the one that I believe has got the most power.
Well, so to kind of, because we've been going on now for 3/4 of an hour, just to kind of wrap this up, Nat, if there was a couple of pieces of advice that you would give people in design agencies, and it's interesting because you can give advice from the top to the bottom, but if you could do one thing, what would it be? Is that being too simplistic?
I suppose if it's one thing, because I could create quotas. I'm pro quotas. That's a conversation for a whole other time. But I'm pro quotas, but I don't advocate a tick box exercise for solving this problem, because I don't believe that you'll change behaviours and you'll change attitudes. So my ask is to say, you have this problem in your business somewhere. It is incumbent on you to work out where it is and what you're doing to help be part of the solution and not part of the problem. I haven't spoken to a single agency that didn't have an issue somewhere with somebody or some element of how, or they couldn't be better. I call them issues because they're the things that we're seeking to change, to create wholesale change. So it's businesses, this is your responsibility. It's on you. There is a massive role you have to play in it. For individuals, get a mentor and work it out from there, for sure. I think that's a real career-changing, life-changing decision, to make that a part of your own personal education and seek to improve your competence.
Does the mentor need to be a woman?
No, absolutely not. Not at all. In fact, the power of it not being is a whole new dynamic. And the reverse mentoring that happens for that male mentor to hear the truth of how some of the women in their business or other people's businesses are feeling is incredibly powerful. So the mentors on Kerning the Gaps programme are a mixture of men and women. I have more women. I think that's natural. We're seeking to change that. And the men in our audiences is growing, and Glasgow is the most diverse audience we've had on every level, by the way. So there are encouraging things happening. And I suppose that's it. Just keep doing it, because we're getting somewhere. It's too slow for my taste, but then I have to be at the forefront going more, faster. Don't forget it, keeping that energy up.
If all of these conversations can just, encourage a number of small changes, or like you say, just even sometimes it's just thinking twice about being aware of that unconscious bias or wherever it appears all that change is positive, however small.
Yeah, it's amazing. When you hear the stories of the impact that it's had at an individual level, and I don't just mean Kerning the Gap, I mean anyone who's been a good leader. Speaking about if people have given them feedback about what things have changed for them, it's amazing. And it varies everything from health benefits because of reduced stress and anxiety, or through to promotions, or through to people going, do you know what, I've just realised I don't fucking want to do this. I'm moving to Australia and being happier than they've ever been. Great. We don't want people in our businesses that don't want to be there. Like that empowerment of what you want to do. You can create that change is a major part of it. So yeah, never presume because it's a small thing. Like, you could change the impact and confidence on one young woman and she'll become a leader of a 1,000-person business, and every single one of them will benefit from the experience that she's had. So it's day by day, person by person. It's not a legislative change that we're talking about. It's really behavioural and attitudinal that will make a massive difference.
So where can people find out more, Nat, if they're inspired to, after our astonishing conversation and insights, where can they find out more about Kerning the Gap?
They can visit kerningthegap.com. They can follow us on Instagram and the Twitters. And we're conscious that the majority of our events and services actually are delivered in person. So we're currently looking at how we can bring that in the digital realm.
Love it. Nat, thanks ever so much for your time. It's been great. And I'd just like to thank Julie and Chris for being here, and Chris's sound, which is still fucking all over the place.
Oh. Yeah, thanks, Nat.
It's been amazing to see you, Nat. We love you.
And we'll do this again, because I think it would be good to check in on a regular basis, just to make sure that we're checking in on ourselves and checking in on your progress. So thanks very much, Nat. That's the wrong music.
This is what makes it 3-star.
3 stars, bitches. 3 stars. Boom. See you next time.